Imagine a line on a map. On one side, this, a staggering concentration of the planet's fresh water, locked in ice, flowing through endless rivers, and pooled in lakes so vast they look like inland seas. On the other side, this, cracked earth, reservoirs at historic lows, and a thirst so profound it threatens the foundations of cities and farms. For more than a century, the line between the United States and Canada has been a symbol of friendship, the longest undefended border in the world. But what happens when the crisis on one side of that line becomes existential? And what happens when the nation on the other side, the one with all the water, delivers a simple, unyielding answer? No. You've probably seen the headlines. Devastating wildfires in California, historic droughts crippling the American Southwest, and you may have heard the rhetoric, the kind that ignites political firestorms. They have millions of gallons of water pouring down from the north with the snowcaps in Canada and all pouring down, and they have essentially a very large faucet. A very large faucet. It sounds so simple, doesn't it? A common sense solution to a life or death problem. Just turn the tap. But this seemingly simple idea has reignited a quiet, century-old struggle between two of the world's closest allies. It's a conflict that runs deeper than any trade dispute or diplomatic spat, flowing through the invisible currents of history, sovereignty, and national identity. The recent pause in negotiations over a 60-year-old water-sharing agreement, the Columbia River Treaty, isn't just a bureaucratic delay. It's a symptom of this much larger tension. This isn't just a story about a single treaty or a single president. It's the story of how the world's most essential resource is rapidly becoming its most contested. It's a look into a future where the term water wars, once the stuff of science fiction, is becoming a terrifying reality. In this deep dive, we're going beyond the headlines to uncover the hidden history, the audacious engineering, and the profound philosophical divide at the heart of North America's unfolding water crisis. This is the real story of the border, the faucet, and the fight for the future of water. Chapter 1. The Ghost of Vanport and the River in Chains. Before we can understand the standoff today, we have to travel back in time to an event that washed away a city and forever changed the destiny of the most powerful river in the Pacific Northwest. The year is 1948. The city is Vanport, Oregon, the second largest city in the state, a bustling hub of wartime workers and their families. And the river is the mighty Columbia. For weeks, the Columbia River, swollen by a heavy snowmelt, had been pushing against the railway berms that served as the city's only flood protection. Officials assured the residents they were safe. Then on Memorial Day, the levees broke. A 10-foot wall of water erupted, giving residents mere minutes to flee. Within a day, Vanport was gone, wiped off the map, a ghost town submerged beneath the very river that had given the region life. The Vanport flood was a brutal confirmation of what engineers had known for years. The Columbia was a wild, untamed force. While both the US and Canada had built dams along its length, there was no coordination. The river didn't respect the international border it crossed, and taming it would require an unprecedented act of cooperation. This catastrophe was the catalyst for what would become the Columbia River Treaty, an agreement signed in 1961 that would fundamentally re-engineer an entire ecosystem. The bargain at the heart of the treaty was, on the surface, a masterpiece of international pragmatism. Canada, on its side of the border, would construct 3 massive storage dams: the Duncan, the Arrow, later renamed the Keenly side, and the Mesa. These dams wouldn't primarily be for generating power in Canada. Their main purpose was to act as a giant break, capturing the spring snowmelt and releasing it in a controlled, predictable fashion throughout the year. For the United States, the benefits were almost incalculable. First, it provided immense flood control, ensuring a disaster like Vanport would never happen again. Second, by smoothing out the river's volatile flow, it allowed American dams downstream, like the Grand Coulee and Bonneville, to generate a huge amount of additional, reliable, and cheap hydroelectric power. In exchange, Canada received 2 things. First, a one-time cash payment of $64 million for the future flood control benefits. And second, a long-term benefit known as the Canadian Entitlement, the right to 1/2 of all the extra power generated in the U.S. thanks to Canada's water storage. For decades, British Columbia sold this entitlement back to the Americans for hundreds of millions of dollars a year, using the money to finance the construction of the very dams that made it possible. It seemed like a perfect win-win, an engineering marvel, a testament to peaceful cooperation. On paper, the Columbia River Treaty was seen as the gold standard for transboundary water management. The treaty doubled down on this approach. It treated the river as a commodity, a resource to be exploited, fundamentally ignoring the fact that it was, and is, a living entity that gives life to everything around it. The treaty's greatest sin of omission was its silence on the river's ecosystem. It contained no explicit provisions for the health of the river itself, and most critically, for its legendary salmon runs. The river was transformed from a wild, vibrant artery of life into one of the most industrialized and hydroelectrically developed river systems on the planet. Chapter 2. The Thirst of a Superpower. Far to the south of the Columbia's cool, glacier-fed headwaters lies another great river system of North America, the Colorado. And its story is one of a promise that could no longer be kept. The Colorado River is the lifeblood for 40 million people across 7 states and parts of Mexico. It irrigates millions of acres of farmland that feed the nation. It fills the taps of sprawling metropolises like Los Angeles, Phoenix, and Las Vegas. But the Colorado is dying. For over a century, the rights to its water have been over-allocated. The original compact, signed in the 1920s, was based on an unusually wet period in the river's history. The math simply never added up. For decades, the system survived by draining its savings accounts. The 2 largest reservoirs in the United States, Lake Mead and Lake Powell. Now, those accounts are nearly empty. The 21st century has brought what scientists call aridification, a long-term drying of the region supercharged by climate change. Rising temperatures mean more of the snowpack that feeds the river evaporates or is absorbed by thirsty soil before it ever reaches a stream. The result is a slow-motion catastrophe. What we're seeing in the Colorado River Basin is a clear fingerprint of climate change. It's not just a drought, which implies a temporary condition. This is a permanent shift to a hotter, drier reality. The system is in a state of structural deficit, meaning that in most years, demand from all the cities and farms exceeds the natural flow of the river. You can't defy that gravity forever. We are now in an era of crisis management, making painful choices about who gets water and who doesn't. Those painful choices are no longer theoretical. Farmers in Arizona and California are being paid to fallow their fields, to let productive land turn to dust. Cities are implementing emergency water restrictions, banning residents from watering their lawns, and imposing steep penalties for overuse. Las Vegas has become a world leader in water conservation, ripping out grass and recycling nearly all of its indoor water. Yet even these Herculean efforts might not be enough. The gleaming mirage of the desert city is sustained by a dwindling resource. This is the landscape of scarcity that forms the backdrop to the entire conversation about Canada's water. For politicians and water managers in states like Arizona and California, the pressure is immense. Their economies, their property values, and the very viability of their communities are at stake. When they look at their own depleted rivers and then look north on a map, they don't see a sovereign nation's sacred birthright. They see a potential solution, an escape valve. They see that very large faucet. This desperation creates a powerful political incentive to look for external answers, rather than confronting the politically toxic internal solutions, such as permanently retiring agricultural land or halting urban growth. The idea of importing water from Canada, however far-fetched, becomes a seductive alternative to telling millions of Americans that their way of life, built on the promise of abundant water, is fundamentally unsustainable. And that is precisely why the rhetoric of a man like Donald Trump found such a receptive audience. His words weren't just a random thought, they were the articulation of a simmering desire. A sense of entitlement that a superpower feels when it confronts a limit to its own resources. Why? His supporters ask, should we suffer when our friendly neighbor to the north has more water than they know what to do with? It's a question that sounds like common sense in Phoenix, but like an existential threat in Toronto. Chapter 3. The Northern Fortress and the Sovereignty Shield. To understand Canada's visceral reaction to the idea of exporting its water, you need to understand something fundamental about the Canadian psyche. For a country with a relatively small population spread over a vast territory, living next to the world's dominant economic and cultural superpower, identity is often defined by what it is not. It is not American, and nothing symbolizes this distinct identity more than its vast, unspoiled natural landscape. Water in this context is more than just H2O. It's the nation's lifeblood, woven into its art, its history, and its sense of self. This is why Canada's response to any suggestion of large-scale water sales has been swift and absolute. The original script attributed this stance to a fictional Prime Minister Mark Carney. While Mark Carney, the former governor of the Banks of Canada and England, is a powerful voice on climate and economics, the political line has been held by the actual government. Under Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and governments before his, the message has been unwavering. Canada's water is not for sale. This isn't a partisan issue in Canada. It cuts across all political lines. The moment a politician even hints at being open to bulk water exports, their career is over. It taps into a deep-seated fear of American domination, the idea that Canada will be reduced to a resource colony, a simple northern branch plant for the American empire. The phrase often used is water nationalism, and it's an incredibly potent political force. This sovereignty shield isn't just rhetoric. It's backed by a history of rejecting ambitious water diversion schemes. And it's the lens through which the modernization of the Columbia River Treaty is now viewed. Negotiations to update the 60-year-old pact began in 2018. The goals were to correct the original treaty's flaws, to incorporate ecosystem function to find a way to restore salmon runs, and to recalculate the value of the Canadian entitlement, which many in the U.S. now see as overly generous. The two countries had reached an agreement in principle, but the pause initiated by the Trump administration in early 2025 threw the entire process into uncertainty. From the American perspective, it was part of a broader review of all international agreements, consistent with an America First policy. They wanted a better deal. But in Canada, this move, combined with the faucet rhetoric, was seen as a power play. The vicious anti-Canadian attacks that have been made on us, they do cause concern. We're going to fight everywhere, including in these negotiations. The stalled treaty talks became a microcosm of the larger conflict. Is water a shared resource to be managed collaboratively or a national asset to be leveraged? For Canada, giving any ground on the Columbia could be seen as the start of a slippery slope. If they make concessions on a river that already crosses the border, what's to stop the U.S. from demanding access to rivers that are entirely within Canadian territory? Mark Carney, speaking not as a prime minister, but as a global finance and climate expert, has warned about the danger of commodifying natural resources that should be held in public trust. He argues that once you put a price tag on a resource as fundamental as water and subject it to international trade agreements, you risk losing sovereign control over it. Corporate interests in trade dispute panels could override national laws, turning a public right into a private asset. Selling water in this view is tantamount to selling a piece of your country's future. It's a risk that Canada, for now, is utterly unwilling to take. Chapter 4: Pipe Dreams and Ecological Nightmares. The idea of moving massive quantities of water from Canada to the United States isn't new. For decades, it has been the stuff of engineering fantasy, the kind of continent-altering megaprojects that capture the imagination. These are not just pipelines, they are attempts to fundamentally replumb the planet. The most famous of these is the Grand Canal, or the Great Recycling and Northern Development Canal. First proposed in the 1950s, the plan was breathtaking in its audacity. It called for building a massive 100-mile-long dike across the mouth of James Bay, the southern extension of Hudson Bay. This would trap the fresh water flowing in from dozens of rivers, slowly turning the saltwater bay into a giant freshwater lake. From there, a complex system of powerful pumps, canals, and diverted rivers would send this water south, flowing into the Great Lakes, which would act as a distribution hub to pipe water to the parched American Midwest and Southwest. The Grand Canal was a product of its time. It was this era of unbridled confidence in our ability to conquer nature with concrete and steel. The proponents saw it as a visionary solution, creating jobs, generating power, and solving water scarcity for the entire continent. It was nation-building on a planetary scale. An even grander vision was the North American Water and Power Alliance, or NWAPA. This 1960s proposal was even more ambitious. It aimed to capture the massive runoff from rivers in Alaska and the Yukon Territory. Through a series of colossal dams and reservoirs, NWAPA would collect this water and divert it south, down the Rocky Mountain Trench, into a 500-mile-long reservoir. From there, it would flow by gravity and canal into every corner of the arid West, from California to Texas, and even into Mexico. Proponents of these schemes sold them as a ticket to a prosperous future. They promised drought-proof agriculture, endless economic growth for cities, and benefits for both countries. But the commentary from the other side painted a much darker picture. These projects are colonial fantasies, plain and simple. The James Bay Project, the Grand Canal, would have destroyed the ancestral homelands of the Cree and Inuit peoples. It would have annihilated a marine ecosystem, a delicate estuary, to create a reservoir. It's the height of arrogance to think you can do that without catastrophic consequences. The negative impacts, which were rarely discussed by the project's boosters, would have been staggering. The environmental disruption to Canada's north would have been permanent, destroying wetlands, altering weather patterns, and devastating fish and wildlife populations. The financial cost would be astronomical, running into the trillions of dollars in today's money. And then there's the energy cost. It takes an immense amount of energy to pump water, especially uphill over mountain ranges. These projects would require the construction of dozens of new power plants, likely nuclear or fossil-fueled, just to power the pumps, creating a massive carbon footprint that would ironically accelerate the very climate change causing the water shortages. While these continent-spanning mega projects are now largely confined to the history books, the core idea hasn't died. Policy groups and think tanks in the U.S. still periodically release studies on the feasibility of long-distance pipelines from Canada. They use more modern language, calling it cooperative flow or a continental water alliance. But for Canadians, it sounds like the same old story, an attempt by their powerful neighbor to drain their resources to fuel unsustainable growth. The dream of a grand engineering solution persists, but for many, it looks more like an ecological and economic nightmare. Chapter 5. Hydropolitics, the new global battlefield. The tension brewing over the rivers of North America is not happening in a vacuum. It is the first world version of a story that is playing out across the globe, as water increasingly becomes the 21st century's most strategic and contested resource. Welcome to the era of hydropolitics. In Northeast Africa, the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam on the Blue Nile has put Ethiopia in direct conflict with Egypt and Sudan downstream, who depend on the Nile's flow for their very survival. In Southeast Asia, China's construction of a cascade of dams on the upper Mekong River gives it control over the flow of water to millions of farmers and fishermen in Myanmar, Laos, Thailand, Cambodia, and Vietnam. Along the border of India and Pakistan, two nuclear-armed rivals, the sharing of the Indus River is governed by a fragile treaty that is under constant strain. These are not future scenarios. They are today's geopolitical realities. Control over water is becoming as critical to national security as control over oil fields was in the 20th century. And in this new global competition, Canada is a superpower. Its freshwater reserves are immense, stretching from the Great Lakes to the glaciers of the far north. These aren't just symbols of natural beauty. In an increasingly thirsty world, they are instruments of immense potential power. This reality forces both the United States and Canada into a delicate, high-stakes balancing act. The U.S. must find solutions to its water crisis that balance diplomatic reality with domestic necessity. Pushing its closest ally too hard could backfire, damaging a relationship critical to trade and security. But ignoring the growing crisis in the West is not an option either. Canada, meanwhile, must guard its most precious resource without isolating itself. It must navigate a future where its water wealth makes it a target of both envy and desperation. The debate forces a confrontation with a fundamental question. Is fresh water a basic human right, a shared heritage of the planet to be protected? Or is it a commodity, a marketable resource to be bought and sold by those who can afford it? Former Bank of England Governor Mark Carney has warned that putting water into the global marketplace is a perilous path for humanity. It could create a world where access to clean water is a privilege of the rich, leaving poor nations dependent on the whims of international markets for their survival. It would, he argues, transform a public right into a financial asset, a step humanity cannot afford to take. Conclusion: redrawing the blueprint. We are left with a standoff, one that is both profoundly simple and infinitely complex. A thirsty superpower built on a dream of limitless growth is looking north, and its water-rich neighbor, protective of its sovereignty and its identity, is refusing to turn on the faucet. The paused negotiations over the 60-year-old Columbia River Treaty are more than a diplomatic footnote. They are a symbol of this continental divide. So what is the lesson here? What is the ultimate takeaway from this quiet conflict unfolding between two friends? It's that the era of solving water scarcity by simply finding a bigger, more distant source is over. The 20th century mindset of conquering nature with massive engineering projects, of diverting one river to save another, of creating a pipe dream to sustain a fantasy, is an ecological and economic dead end. History has shown us that once such a trade flow begins, the economic and political momentum becomes almost impossible to reverse, creating dependence, not partnership. True water security in the 21st century will not come from a pipeline stretching across a continent. It will come from a radical rethinking of how we use, value, and manage the water we already have. It will be born from innovations that seem like science fiction a generation ago. Large-scale water recycling that turns wastewater into pure drinking water, advanced desalination plants powered by renewable energy that can turn oceans into an affordable source of supply, and revolutionary changes in agriculture that allow us to grow more food with a fraction of the water. The tension between the United States and Canada serves as a crucial warning. Attempting to solve a problem of scarcity with a mindset of ownership and leverage will only lead to deeper conflict. The real sustainable solution lies in each city, each state, and each nation learning to live within its own hydrological means. The struggle over water isn't about redrawing the borders on a map. It's about redrawing the very blueprint of how we live on this planet. The next chapter in that story isn't written in treaties or political speeches. It's being written right now, in the silent, powerful flow of a river, and in the choices we make to protect it.